Welcome, everyone. Welcome. Welcome back to the New Jersey Film Festival Filmmaker Q&A session. Today we have a really great film director here whose documentary, The History of Horror and Metal, will be screening at the New Jersey Film Festival in February. And I'll tell you more about the screening and all that stuff at the end of the Q&A, but I wanted to introduce you to the director, and his baby is this film. His name is Mike Schiff. Mike, you live in the Bronx?
Yeah. Born and raised in the Bronx. Been there.
Very cool.
Been there 46 years.
Wow. Well, I've gone to the Bronx many times to see Yankee games as well as other things up in that area. So I'm very familiar, and welcome to the Q&A. I guess I wanted to pepper you with some questions. Some of them are just very generic. You know, like how did this film come about? I know it's your baby. You wrote it, you directed it, you produced it, you shot it, you edited it. You're kind of like an Orson Welles on this film. Tell us what was the motivation to make the film? So
back in 2014, my friend and also a producer, he's a producer on the film, Robert Lucas. He's very well connected in the metal and horror scene, and he's friends with Kirk Hammett. And Kirk Hammett was putting on his Fear Fest Evil convention out in California in 2014. So Rob brought me on board to do some photography, some camera work for the event, and also just kind of be around to sort of help out. So what Kirk put on was a convention that really brought in both worlds together, heavy metal and horror. You know, you had some major stars from both worlds coming together to this convention. And once the weekend was over, I realized that there hadn't yet been a documentary made on why there is this connection between heavy metal and horror. You know, it's like we all kind of knew it was there, but we never really, we've never really seen it in a documentary form. So I decided that it would be a good opportunity to try something that hasn't been done before. And that's kind of the background of how it started. And because we knew so many people in the business at that point, it was, I wouldn't say easy, but a little bit easier to approach people, you know, heavy metal and horror stars, and ask them to be interviewed, and then it kind of built from there.
I mean, it's just an amazing array of people that you lined up for interviews. I mean, there's got to be at least 50 interviews in there with various people, really well known and some obscure for me anyway. And I was just, I just kind of couldn't believe that you were able to get some of these people, but knowing that you had connections makes perfect sense. But did these people come to you, or did you have to go to them? I mean, Alice Cooper, John Carpenter, I mean, all of these, very famous people, did they come to a location to have you film them, or was it you going to them?
It was a big combination of everything. I filmed a lot of the interviews at horror conventions, which were, the horror conventions were great because there were so many celebrities at one place over a period of 3 days. Yeah. So I was able to set up a room at the hotel where the convention was at, and set up all my lights and cameras and everything, and then just approach people on the floor and say, hey, filming this documentary, The History of Metal and Horror, you know, I'd love to interview you for the film. We have a room set up in the hotel, so if you have a free, 15, 20 minutes where you can step away from your table, or before the convention starts, feel free to come up, and chat with us for a little bit. So I got a lot of interviews that way. There was some waiting, because I'm in New York, so sometimes bands might come to New York when they're on tour, right? So Chris Jericho was my first interview, and his band Fozzy was performing in New York. So I reached out to him. I said, hey, I see you're, and I knew Chris for a couple of years. So I reached out to him. I said, hey, I see you guys are going to be in town before your show. Do you have a little bit of time to sit down with us? So that's how I got his interview. So it was a lot of that. Rob Zombie, the same thing. Finally, when his band came to New York and played at Jones Beach, I've been in touch with his management for over a year, and then finally the opportunity came up, and they said, yeah, this is the perfect time to do it. Let's do it. So I got it that way. Then there was also flying out to people, like flying out to Alice Cooper, at his restaurant, Cooperstown, right? He had a whole place set up. They said, yeah, just, come down to Cooperstown and he'll sit down with you. And so his management was very cool. So I did that. And then also someone like Dave Mustaine had us over at his house, right? So there's a lot of different variations in how we did the interviews.
But that's labor intensive. I mean, this process must have taken months to get everything together, and then the editing process was very time consuming. I mean, you had to cut in all of this archival footage of movies that you've referenced, as well as, you know, archival footage of bands playing. And I mean, the editing process must have been really, really time consuming. Was it a laborious process? I mean, how long did it take you to finish this project? I mean, from start to
From start to finish, it was about 6.5 years. So it was a long
Holy
time.
shit.
It was a
Yeah,
long time. You know, people always ask me. They've asked me along the way, like, you know, what's going on? You know, why is it taking so long? And
yeah, yeah,
so there was a lot of components. It was you know, trying to raise money to
yeah.
in the beginning to get things going. It was a lot of it was working on just waiting on people's availability. You know, sometimes you just could. It took, like I said, it took 1.5 years to get Rob Zombie. Sometimes it's just, you know, it's, you get the interest from the artists, but
Yeah.
then it's just waiting for them to be available. So there's a lot of waiting. It's not like shooting a film where it's like, okay, we're hiring you to be at this place this time, and then we're just gonna get the whole thing done in 5 or 6 weeks. You know, it doesn't
Yeah.
work like that. It's like, hey, whatever you're free, we'll do it. So there's a lot of waiting, and then yeah, it's like I'm doing most of the work myself. So it's not like I have a huge team of people who I can just say, okay, hey, I just shot this interview, here it is, cut it together. You know, it's like I shoot it, I bring it home, I start cutting it, and then it was just it was a long process of getting all that stuff done.
Yeah. Did the pandemic slow you down as well? Or was that when you were able to concentrate on editing it?
Yeah. I mean, I had been editing all along, but the pandemic didn't really slow down the process so much.
That's
Everything was already shot. It's not like I had to shoot anything else anymore after that.
right.
And then picture was basically locked. And so throughout the pandemic process, I was just working on visual effects, you know, with some of the other artists who helped put that together, and sound design and all that kind of stuff. So in that sense, the pandemic didn't really hurt or slow down the process. I took advantage of that time to just get everything finished up.
Yeah, the pandemic definitely killed a lot of feature films. I mean, we got a plethora of documentaries at the height of, well, I'd say a year into the pandemic. We didn't get as many features as we normally do because of the pandemic really killing. I mean, just the legalities of having people on set and things like that. But your film is not exclusively a documentary. And when I first started watching the film, I said, wait, am I watching the right movie? And I guess we need to let people know, I mean, you had Alex Rafala play a man named Christopher, who's the last man on Earth. And that's how the film begins, as this cloaked human making his way through the debris of, you know, some kind of disaster that has killed off most of the human race. And that's how the film begins, until he stumbles upon these videotapes in this warehouse that he's in, and then he pops a number of them in. I remember the history of gardening, and then he gets to the history of metal and horror and metal, and then that's in earnest how the film begins. And we're introduced to Michael Berryman, who kind of, you know, this story punctuates the film, right? There's 5 or 6 parts to your movie, right? And it's broken down. We have this prologue, and then we get the history. I wrote them down. The heavy metal rock, no, the origins of heavy metal and horror is the first section, and you interview a number of these artists and the movies that influenced them. And then there's another section on their horror experiences, right? The heavy metal rockers and their horror experiences. Was this the design, to break it down into pieces?
Yeah, I started it out with the history of horror because it all comes, you know, all comes back to horror, and horror was one of the original genres in human history. I mean, it goes back, I mean, thousands and thousands of years of people sitting by campfires telling, you know, scary stories and warning people of things, you know, through fear,
Right.
and that evolved. So I wanted to start with that as a base, because ultimately what we're talking about is how heavy metal artists especially were influenced by horror. So I want to give the backstory of that,
Right.
and then also talk about you know, the artist's, heavy metal artist's first experience with horror growing up. What was
Yeah,
that
yeah.
like? Because that's something that a lot of us can relate to, because we were all kids at one time, and many of us who share this love of horror can kind of relate to it. Oh yeah, I remember collecting these toys and these models and building these things and collecting these magazines and stuff like that. So we get into that, and then we get into the history of metal, which is kind of a brief subject because it's a newer genre. It doesn't go back as far.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to kind of touch on that a little bit, like where did metal basically start? How did it evolve from from the blues into rock and roll into heavy metal?
Black Sabbath.
And then
Black Sabbath.
and right, and then we get into just how the two genres kind of merged, and how musicians started bringing in horror, into their stage shows and their music and everything, and we kind of go on from there.
Did you have to deal with rights issues on securing the images for? I mean, or there's so many clips from different movies, and I thought just that and getting the rights to that might have taken forever, as well as getting, the rights to some of the music. Was that a time-consuming process as well?
Yeah, I mean, I was really worried about it in the beginning, but I consulted with a law firm, a major law firm in California, and they assured me that because it's a documentary, it's an educational piece, that that's basically everything is just fair use.
Fair use,
right?
Yeah.
So I didn't use copywritten music. That's a little bit more complicated because then you're dealing with record labels and stuff like that. But when you're using images, clips from movies, as long as it's not, you're not showing them in a sort of a derogatory way,
you're educating them.
In a sense, you're educating the audience, you're promoting their films, so they're generally, the studios are fine with it, and it just goes under fair use. So so I had the attorneys watch the entire film. They had me tweak a few things, not a lot though, because everything pretty much cleared.
Very cool.
was clear, and it wasn't that big of a deal.
Yeah, one of my mentors, I think, began this whole fair use documentary. His name is Mark Rappaport, and he did this documentary on Rock Hudson's home movies, and he used lots of clips from his movies. And there were some challenges, I think, to his stuff, but the fair use clause, since he was commenting on the work, that I think you can do that. But tell us about the music that you actually had scored for the movie. I mean, I think that's really great too. You have a number of wonderful performers that help give the movie some oomph from the sound perspective.
Yeah. So the original score, which is for the film portion of the film, was by Jimmy Urin, who formerly of Mindless Self-Indulgence. It was kind of a local New York group. I had reached out to him a couple of years back and asked, we started chatting, and he offered to do the score for the short film portion. So he did that. And then for the documentary portion, which is most of the film, that's where I needed a lot more music for. And that was a little tricky, because then you get into trying to get royalty-free music, but then it's not free. It's still going to come with a pretty hefty price tag, because you can use it, but you still have to basically pay for the rights, and then you have to worry about future distribution and all that stuff. So I was fortunate enough to have a friend who I went to high school with, my friend Phil, who he's been in several bands over the years, and he's currently in a band called Knights of the Black. And most of the guys are also Bronx residents, so we're all kind of local, New York City guys, Bronx guys. So they had a huge catalog of music over the years, and I reached out to them. I said, hey, and Phil is actually in the film. He's in the end. It's during the credit sequence. So and he actually closes the film. So him and I go way back. But they have this huge catalog of music, and I reached out and I said, hey, I'm looking to fill my entire film with background music for the interviews. What do you guys think about providing your music? And they were totally down. They're huge horror fans, and their music is fantastic. I think it's really top notch, awesome music. And that was just really lucky to have people, awesome guys who are able to sort of, give me a soundtrack, which is great.
That's awesome. And how were you able to settle on Alex as Christopher? How did you find him?
Yeah, I just did a casting call, like an online casting call, and
Hmm.
got tons of submissions, and it was tough, but it was cool because back in the day you'd have to have in-person auditions, and you have a huge cattle call. You'd have to rent a space and have a huge line of people outside. This time it just got submissions online,
Right, right.
and then you say, all right, I'm going to put these people in the yes, these in the maybe, these in the no. So Alex's performance was just so good. He got up in that yes box
Yeah.
pretty early on, and then I had him just do some lines from the film. I was like, this guy is great, and he's up and coming actor. I think he did a fantastic job.
I think so
One of the
too.
nicest guys. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I think he's got a bright future ahead, and hopefully this will kind of help him move forward in his career.
But when did you come up with the plan to do this wraparound for the documentary with this kind of fictional story that embellishes the project to give it a different flavor than a kind of quote unquote standard documentary? Or
That
was it
was
something that
yeah,
you planned on from the beginning?
that was pretty early on. I'd say within the first couple of months, I realized that I didn't want to just do a standard run-of-the-mill documentary. Like, okay, jump right in, either with narration or just talking heads and B-roll. I wanted to add
Mm.
a little bit something different to the project, and it also gave me an opportunity because ultimately I want to do the feature films. So it gave me also an opportunity to do a short that I can kind of throw in there, use it as a chapter introducer. And so very early on, I realized that I wanted to do something different. I wasn't sure what the storyline was going to be. I went from a couple of different, I had a couple of different ideas in the beginning
Mm.
that I ended up scrapping, and ultimately I came up with this one. And I
And
was,
where
I
did you
was
actually shoot that opening scene? I mean, is it in the local area? Because it doesn't look like the Bronx to me. So,
No, it's a little further up north. It's near West Point. My
mm.
friend Bill Diamond, he has a studio up there. He used to work for Jim Henson, and he still does a lot of work with studio sets, lighting, things like that. A lot of stuff on Broadway, and he has a huge space up there, a huge warehouse, right? And I've been there a couple of times. So he said, yeah, if you ever want to shoot anything, come on up and do it. I was like, well, this place would be perfect for, and I think I'm not sure if the location itself helped inspire the storyline or the other way around, but yeah, it was just a perfect location.
Yeah,
And Bill had all the set props, and he had the lighting that he put together for us. So yeah, that's how that came
it
together.
worked out great. And how about Michael Berryman? How were you able to get him to be part of your film? I mean, he's definitely got that. He gives it that pizzazz that I think the film needed at the very beginning to give it a
Hmm.
counterpoint to Alex good boy looks. So
Yeah,
how did
yes.
you get him?
A couple of people that I was looking for, an older person, someone with a name, someone who's been in the hard business for a while.
Yeah.
Had a couple of different ideas, and Michael Berryman. I was talking to someone, and he said, "Well, what about Michael Berryman?" I was like, "Yeah, Michael Berryman sounds like a good one." So, yeah. So my friend out in California, James Balsamo, another filmmaker, he said, yeah, if you want Michael Berryman, here's his manager's phone number or email address.
Very cool.
So I reached out, and I said, yeah, I'm interested in Michael Berryman. She's like, okay, sounds good. And that's how that kind of came about. So we flew him down to Burbank, shot all his green screen stuff in Burbank,
Mm.
and I just cut it all in there. So we had it filmed all the other stuff prior to that, so I knew how to position him in front of the green screen, which direction to look for the camera so that it
Right,
matched. Because he's basically a figure inside the computer monitor and
right.
stuff. So yeah,
But
so we just
pre-planning
needed to
is
position.
your film is very tight, and it feels like you had done a lot of pre-planning, and it shows. So, congrats to you
Yeah,
for that. Now,
thanks.
folks, what I wanted to do now for our audience is to share screen. Let me just make sure so I can share the trailer with the audience so they can see it. And I don't know if I'll show the whole thing, but just to give some flavor to what we have. And we go to that. And hopefully this will, here we go, we'll make it big. And
What is the history of metal? and horror? Let's find out.
I think what makes effective horror is that it registers the anxiety of the humans that are watching. That's what horror does best.
My favorites by far, if anybody knows me, it's the Universal Monsters. That's my whole life.
My mom took me to see the original Jaws when I was really young, and it scarred me for life.
The first VHS tape I ever had was Dawn of the Dead, and I would just let it play over and over all day long. I must have watched it thousands of times.
The movie that affected me the most was Salem's Lot.
Hellraiser is another massive, great film, and I remember watching that for the first time and being totally blown away with it.
It's human, it's not human, and then there's this little matter of having a whole bunch of nails banged into your head. Sounds like a crazy idea.
The movie Ghoulies were on. I was obsessed with that show. It didn't seem that different to me, the Bugs Bunny to the Frankenstein. Like, it really was a natural kind of thing.
Of course, like most kids, I was watching cartoons on Saturdays, but I was also watching horror movies.
Captain Spaulding triggered the rebellious nature of people, and that is kind of the attitude that goes along with metal and horror.
Black Sabbath was a Boris Karloff film, right? You know, that's where they got the name from the film, and they combined it with heavy music, and that's how heavy metal was born.
You had people on one hand doing horror music, and you had people on the other hand doing horror film, and then somewhere in the middle where these two circles crossed, you had a hybrid.
I use the music, a lot of metal music, for listening to in between violent scenes. It just helps my energy.
I still get goosebumps when the skeleton comes up and starts saying, "Do you want a party?" It was like, okay, now chaos is going to ensue.
For years and years, I've been a fan of Metallica. I just think they're awesome.
I know there are people out there who love horror. I know there are people who love heavy metal. And I know there are people who love both. I'm reaching out to those people and saying, hey, man, I'm into it too. And I got a lot of cool stuff. You guys should come over and check it out.
I just stopped there for a second. And, all right, we switch over to how to buy tickets. That was just to give you a little taste. You can check out the whole trailer on YouTube. And there's quite a few of them. I think there's 3, is that right, Mike?
I had a couple of promos. I think some other people have shared them as well, but the only one that I have up now is just the trailer, the 2021 trailer.
All right, so let's say you want to buy tickets to this movie. How do you do that? You go to njfilmfest.com. It's also back here. If you want to write it down, you can do that. Once you get to our homepage, you would click on current events, which just bounces you down a little bit. And then you click on the red button, which sends you to our Eventive site, since we're going to be doing the New Jersey Film Festival in the spring as a hybrid, where all of the film programs, there's over 40 films that'll be shown online. And then we're doing 5 live screenings, and Mike's film is going to be shown live, and you can track it down over here by hitting this button, which would be Friday, February 18th, which is, the festival closing night. We do the Super 8 festival on the 19th and 20th, but that's a separate festival within the larger festival. And if you wanted to buy tickets, you just would hit pre-order now, and there'll be all sorts of prompts to pay. It's $15, and that will allow you to watch it online for 1 day. In other words, you can start watching it at 12:01 on the 18th, on Friday. And once you start watching, you have 24 hours to finish watching. So let's say you don't want to start watching till Friday at 11:45 in the evening, you can still finish it into the next day. The live screening is going to be at 7 p.m. in Voorhees Hall, which is our beautiful space on the Rutgers campus. It's a block away from the New Brunswick train station. It's about a 45-minute to an hour train ride from Penn Station, and there's lots of parking, so you can always come and check it out live. In fact, we had one fellow, let me just stop sharing, we don't need to do that anymore. We had one fellow who would watch the movie during the day, and then he would come and watch it again, because the price you pay allows you to do both. And he would watch it on our big screen, and he did that quite a few times, and I thought, wow. But this this guy turned out to be a real movie lover. And we had a number of people do that. So I think we kept that. We were not an online festival until COVID. And that opened us up to people all over the world, in fact, and was the only way we could survive as a film festival, because the live screenings are fairly well attended last fall. But you know, most people are still not comfortable going to the movies. Although I don't know, with new variants and stuff, will that make it worse or will it get better? I don't know. But Mike will be there to do a Q&A after the live screening, which starts at 7 o'clock. We're in Voorhees 105, which is on the Rutgers campus at 71 Hamilton Street in New Brunswick, New Jersey. And I hope you'll join us. And I want to say thanks to Mike Schiff for hanging out with us for the last half hour of this Q&A, and hope to see you at the movies. Thanks, Mike.
All right. Thanks so much. I appreciate it.